Welcome to another episode of All Things in the Name of Love. Today I have with me a beautiful, beautiful woman named Lisa Campion, who is a psychic counselor and Reiki master teacher with over 30 years of experience. She specializes in training emerging psychics, empaths, and healers so that they can fully step into their gifts, since the world, as we both know, needs all the healers it can get right now. You are also the author of The Art of Psychic Reiki and the award-winning Energy Healing for Empaths. And you have a new book coming out called Awakening Your Psychic Abilities and the Psychic Awakening Journal. And I could keep going on, but I just want to start talking. So thank you so much for joining me. And thank you so much for feeling the call to help us all wake up to our innate gifts and share them with the world.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it is a real passion of mine for sure.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit, like, how did this get started for you? Like, were you always psychic, or were you like, does this come in? Did you like born and then you repressed it? Like, how did that happen?
I was born with it, so it's definitely one of those I see dead people kids. I was born in the 60s, just outside of Boston. And back in the day there was there was nothing, no information, no books in the library, no podcasts like this, no internet. Think about it. Remember, I don't know
Yeah,
if you remember way back then, but boy,
I was born in '69, so I get it, and I grew
yeah.
up in Connecticut, so I know what you're talking about.
Awesome, yeah. And there was just was nothing. My house was super haunted. Like I grew up in one of those really like cute, big old Victorian houses that was super haunted. And so I just really spent the first 20 years of my life trying to figure out what was going on. Um I, like how to turn it off and how to pretend to be normal in public, like all the things. And I only mildly succeeded in that one. And then I was lucky that I had hippie parents, so I never turned it off. I started working as a psychic when I was 19, and I've never done anything else in my whole life.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. But my hippie parents blessed me by taking me to transcendental meditation when I was 10, because that's what you did when you were a hippie in 1974. And I met I met Maharishi. It was kind of a funny story. I had no idea who he was because I was 10. But
Right.
we're in this big temple and everyone has offerings and flowers and fruit. And he was taking everybody into the back room and doing like Diksha Darshan on them, like giving them a kind of an attunement, if you will, and a mantra. And he was talking to his translator. So he was kind of like blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden he looked at me and he was like, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." He's like, "I can see that what's going on with you. And because you grew up in America, you're kind of out of luck. Like, they're not going to be able to help you. If you had been born in my country, we would know what to do. But because you're an American, you're out of luck. But you got to hang in there because you're going to help a lot of people when you get older."
Wow.
I was just like, oh my God, like he was the first adult who said something to me that made sense. Of course, I had no idea who he was until I went to college and I studied comparative religion. Then I was like, oh my God, I think that was him. And
Wow.
yeah, it was. So I had these kind of really lucky spiritual breaks along the way. My parents took me to um back then it was called the Silva mind control. Now it's called the Silva method.
Yep.
Fantastic training for a psychic. And so I had, some breaks along the way. And then I went to college, went to university, and it was the dawn of the new age. Hallelujah. And all of a sudden there were psychics and books and new age bookstores. And I got actually proper training on how to manage my gift and accelerate my gift. And that's when I started working as a psychic.
Cool.
So that's it. It's been my whole life. I've done it ever since. I quickly figured out I didn't actually know enough. So I went back to school and became a therapist. I graduated from college, became a therapist. And so for years, I combined therapy with psychic readings, or really, I threw a little therapy in with my psychic readings. And then 26 years ago, I learned Reiki and added that into the mix. And these days, I really focus on teaching, training, mentoring other people, writing books, running classes, because more and more people are, opening or having really profound psychic experiences. That generations that are, have come in, each generation is like more psychic and more sensitive. And I feel like I have this incredible vantage point to be able to help people in a way I didn't get help, you know? So
Mhm.
like I wrote the books that I wished I could have found in the library, and I became the teacher mentor that I was looking for.
Beautiful.
And I feel really passionately about it because it sucked, honestly. And if I can help somebody else, it's really scary to go through a psychic opening, for a lot of people. And if I
Mhm.
can help somebody manage it more gracefully than I did, which was really thrashing around and making every mistake on the planet, then that's a really good feeling for me to help other people that way.
That's really beautiful. I was astro traveling when I was little, and when my grandpa died, he sat on my bed for 3
Yeah.
days. I was freaking out because I didn't know any better. And I
Yep.
had two grandparent on each side get institutionalized, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get institutionalized, so I'm going to shut this down because
Uh,
nobody in my family can relate with this. And I'd shut it down. Ha 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 ha. You know what I mean? Like I tried to repress it, but it was like couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. And I'm like, okay, well, there's something more than that. And then when my dad died in 2009 and I saw his body scatter or his soul scatter across the universe and looked at his body and didn't recognize him, I was like, okay, I can't pretend this anymore. There's
yeah.
things that there's more, a lot more to life than I could ever imagine. And then I gave myself permission to go through the Silva method and start opening up my gifts. And
Uh-oh.
yeah, and by that time, Mind Valley was like offering it. So I went through Mind Valley, and Vishen had a beautiful meditation of forgiveness that I did for 7 years, like, because I had a lot to forgive. Um, but like, it was just like, okay, now you're ready. And you're not going to waste your life anymore doing things that you think other people want you to do when you have a soul calling. And about 5 years ago, I started taking body talk classes and then started working with animals and doing energy healing with animals. And that just tickles my fancy.
Beautiful. What a beautiful process. And I think like a lot of times it's, when we have a near death experience or we are close to somebody that dies, that's an initiatory event for a lot of people and their
Mhm.
psychic stuff. And yeah, I love your story. It's so sweet. It's so beautiful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for sharing that with me.
You're welcome. I love that you're like, all right, so many questions. Since 2020, how have you seen your working with others shift?
It was an interesting shift. I had been working like 20, 25 clients a week for 25 years.
Okay.
And, having a private practice and that I was feeling a little burned out, by that, and kind of wondering how I could shift into a different way of being. I wanted to get kind of out of the grind of that seeing that many clients. And I had published a book. My first book came out in 2018. It's called The Art of Psychic Reiki. And I just really felt very strongly called. I was asking myself, how can I make a bigger impact? How can I shift into teaching and mentoring and out of so much private work? And then the pandemic came, and it's all of a sudden, we couldn't teach. I was teaching Reiki in person, and I had to bring my classes online. I brought my psychic development classes online. We were all doing that. And for me, it was a bit of a blessing, honestly, because I I closed my office. I closed my brick and mortar office and sort of rode the wave of that shift that we were all going through, with a book that's sold and continues to sell quite a lot of copies. So for me it was kind of I sort of had to do it. And that kind of got me over the fear of like, is this gonna work? And since that time I've published I just got a contract for my sixth book.
Awesome.
I know I keep doing it. So I'm I really feel like super happy that I was able to shift into you know, more teaching, mentoring, and writing.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know if I would have had the courage to kind of let go of my practice unless that had happened.
Mhm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
How are you seeing your, like, are you seeing how are and are first, are you seeing and what are the different shifts in your clients for how, what you're serving now?
I just feel like there's this mass acceleration of people waking up, of people having, spiritual, pretty profound spiritual awakenings. And I think that's always been true, but since that time, it's been this like just really blown the top off that. And I credit some of it to like the conversations just become more normal, like on TikTok and social media, people are talking about it in a way that I think opens the conversation into the mainstream and don't believe everything you hear from the TikTok psychics, but I'm really glad they're talking about it, and I think that the things that we do like yoga, meditation, Reiki, I always call those the three gateways into a larger spiritual world. And back in the day, like you had to climb the mountains in Tibet and bang on the temple door, and maybe they would teach you yoga, Reiki, and meditation. And now it's so available. So many people are turning to that. I think plant medicine has been like a big, shift, and all these things are opening that used to be secret, and
Mm,
we didn't have access to them. And I also think the younger people are coming in more psychic than ever. And this, in general, the shift in human consciousness that we're going through, this ascension, whatever you want to call it, is really, really quickly opening people. Um, and for some people, it's joyous and ecstatic, and for other people, it's a bit terrifying.
yeah.
And I really specialize in people who are going through sudden psychic openings,
Mm,
because if you don't know what's going on, you do think you're crazy, or somebody does try to put you in a mental hospital, your parents drag you to the church and throw holy water on you, like all the, you know, it doesn't always go well. So I'm really like to be that like, okay, person that can help somebody integrate and
mm,
and and I really, because I taught Reiki for so long, and I was teaching Reiki and psychic development side by side, um and I was like, wow, I do when I, people go through Reiki, their psychic just pops open like crazy. And
mm,
those people need some guidance on what to do because it's not canon. It's not part of the normal Reiki curriculum. And a lot of my Reiki students came to me because they're like, I'm having all these psychic experiences, and my Reiki teacher just told me to cut it out. But I can't cut it out, and I don't know what to do.
dang.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't taken Reiki per se, but it's part of the body talk system. Um, so I get like it's more I would say it's more verbal than Reiki because I channel what I feel and I write it out and I record it. Instead
Yeah.
of just laying hands and feeling the different places. But there's this awareness, like this inner knowingness of what needs to happen. And it's just really fascinating that there's so many different models of healing now that, when we were like, I knew I was going to be a doctor when I was 10. I had no idea. Well, it didn't exist. Body talk didn't exist when I was 10.
Mm.
And I grew up in Connecticut. So like, and that was developed in Australia. So like, I would not have come across it
Yeah.
anytime, even in my 20s, I wouldn't have come across it. So, the fact that there's so many different modalities now speaks to our elevation in consciousness.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I've been teaching Reiki for 26 years now, and it's changed a lot. The world, when I started doing it back in 1999, it was still pretty weird. It was still pretty
Yeah.
fringy and, out there.
Mhm.
And, it's way more mainstream now. Like I live in Rhode Island, but in all the big hospitals here in New England, they all have Reiki. And I think Reiki's in
Oh,
eight.
that's cool.
Yeah, I think Reiki's in 800 hospitals throughout the whole country, you know. But any of the hospitals here where I live, you go in and they have full-time Reiki staff that
That's
are,
awesome.
it's really so much more mainstream. And from what I used back in the day, I would train nurses and they'd be secret. They would be like, shh, don't tell anybody. Like, you know,
Right.
and now that's not the case. So I do feel like it's such a beautiful opening, and I think all those healing styles are evolving, Reiki's evolving, and that's how it should be. We need to continue um to evolve. And maybe about 5 years ago I realized I wasn't really doing Reiki anymore. I was doing this other stuff, and I don't know, I call it quantum healing because I don't know what else to call it, but it's really fifth dimensional healing instead of um using vibration like all old school healings were vibrational healings, like homeopathy and gemstones and Reiki and sound healing and all those, they're beautiful, but they're really working with vibration. And quantum healing works with light. It's more of a kind of a photonic energy. And it's so much quicker. It's just almost instant healing, like really, really deep at the root of the cause. Kind of one healing, and we can really like plow through what would have been like years of healing back in the day.
Yeah.
And and I think that's incredible. It's sort of we're shifting our frequency higher and higher. We have access to these higher frequencies that I think are quite miraculous, quite amazing. And so I've been very curiously tracking that progress in myself, and I see it in so many people. A couple of years ago, nobody was doing that. Nobody knew what that was. That wasn't a thing. And
Mhm.
now so many people are, and I think that's great.
I agree because like the stuff I see, because I work primarily with animals, and the stuff that comes through me, yes, I use body talk as a basis, but like there's stuff that comes through me that I've never heard of before. And it's like, wow, this is so cool. And now I've always been connected with the animals, but now they're actually not just having a session to tell me that needs to be healed, but they're actually coming in and having conversations with their humans.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow, they're actual like it's not just a sense, it's an actual I'm getting words. Which is really cool because like they have a lot to say to us. And it just for my comfort level, I start with a body talk. Because like let's get to root causes of stuff. If there's anything that's in their field that needs to be cleared, let's do that. And then if anything else needs to come in. And I just did a session today and the dog was like, hey, how about saging me? Because he goes to work with his human and he said, and when you have the clients, could you sage me after each one? Because like I just want to clear the energy field. I'm like, wow, a dog wants to get saged. That's awesome.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, as we shift I mean, everything is shifting consciousness. The trees are getting louder. I'm looking at some trees right now, and they're definitely louder than they were because like they've been waiting for us, is what I feel. They've been waiting for us to have the awareness to know that we're not the only ones that communicate.
Yeah.
And
So funny, when you were talking, my dog and cat came into the room. I
they,
usually don't let them in, and they just burst in through the door.
oh, hi
I
babies.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they what I feel with them is they still want to support us, but they want to be like interdependent as opposed to the owner pet paradigm,
Mm,
because that's just not serving them anymore. Um,
yeah.
and that's a concept that's difficult to embrace because that's how it's been. So we're changing epigenetics in
Wow.
inner psychic and with them because they've always had this codependent relationship with humans.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But it's sort of almost like servant-like in a way. Our domesticated animals, it's like they have that sort of servant energy. And I wonder, when you're talking of what they're kind of coming into their own agency or their own, sovereignty, even though they still can't, operate the can opener.
Right,
But,
right.
they just from an energetic standpoint, they're more sovereign.
Yeah. Like this dog was like, "Hey mom, I want to help you, but I'm not taking on the energy of your humans anymore. Like I love them. I'm not doing that anymore because it's exhausting me." He was like, he wasn't yawning, he was sighing at the end of the day.
Wow.
Like, yeah, that's because he's trying to release energy. Because he's just taking on like empath.
Yep.
As we are empaths, we have learned to protect ourselves from the energy of others. Um, Animals haven't quite figured that out yet.
Mm,
So
fascinating.
yeah. So tuning in. What has been one of the most curious experiences you've had on this journey?
Hmm. Um, I think that it's probably like the sort of mirroring aspect of how the world works. So
Mhm.
like, as I work on something inside myself, like I'm a deep believer that we really need to continue to do the work. So I'm
Mhm.
always, old timey psychics called it clearing the channel, where you kind of do your internal work and you get your own stuff out of the way so you can be a clearer channel. And I'm just like always amazed by how when I'm working on something, it's reflected in every interaction that I have with people, with all the signs and omens that are around me, how my clients come in with my issue du jour, and it's just like this holographic experience of I,
Mhm.
I can't get away from that. And I don't want to get away from it. And
Mhm.
I just get really curious. It feels kind of juicy to me, like where I'm like, wow, I'm really getting this lesson, like, and through every dimension of my being. And if I lean into it and surrender and do the work, it's so much more painful than if I resist, you know, which sometimes I do because I'm like, oh, really? Can't I get a minute here? But um, you know, that's I think kind of it. Like that way the universe mirrors back to me everything that I'm going through. And then when I figure it out, I then take it to my clients and
Mhm.
continue to evolve what I'm teaching. And I think that's fascinating and curious.
Beautiful. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, I've had anxiety most of my life because, the whole growing up in Connecticut thing, the 70s. And I've finally done enough somatic work that I could feel past the anxiety into the sorrow that's deeply, really, really, really deep. And I felt it a couple weeks ago for the first time, and I was so grateful that I've done so much work on myself that I could actually get past that to feel it. It's like, oh, you're finally here. I don't have to deal with anxiety anymore. I can just feel this. And
Wow.
yeah, it was just this deep shift in my awareness of like, because we know everything's for us, whether or not we want it to be. Um, it was like this like, yes, this is actually painful in my heart because it's a deep sadness, but like how cool that I've gotten to this place that I could feel it, and how grateful I am that I'm safe enough in my body that my body feels safe enough to express it.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. I got a new book. I just got a new book deal and it's about inner child work. So it's
Mm.
called Sacred Reparenting, spiritual and intuitive healing for your inner child. And I've been doing inner child work on myself for like 25 years. And I do it with all my clients and students too. And it's just, there was just sort of this confluence of like, I got a book deal on doing inner child work. And then I had to do a ton of inner child work at like levels that I've never done it before,
Oh.
really at a deeper level than I've ever been able to access.
Mm.
And when I was in that, I was like, universe, why are you torturing me? With all this heavy stuff. And then I was like, oh, it's because I said book about inner child. And now I'm like, I think it's like walking the talk, like we have to embody it. I have to embody it at a deeper level, um, in order to kind of bring that work out into the world. And then, I buckled down and I did it. And then I broke through the other side as I healed another layer of childhood trauma and ancestral lineage stuff. And and then felt like so much more joy and lightness on the other side of that, that even though it was super heavy lifting, like super heavy lifting while I was doing
Mhm.
it, I'm now in a state of like really deep gratitude that
Mhm.
that came up. And I'm more like a lot of energy got liberated
Mhm. Mhm.
from having like let that's a heavy load, right?
Oh yeah, like like I used to. So I'm a former historian, and so I've been doing research for 38 years. When I used to do inner child work, I turned that part of me onto my 6-year-old self.
Oh, wow.
She was like, "You're re-traumatizing me. You're bringing the thing that can find anything, into my experience? Are you crazy?" And so when she gave me that realization, I'm like, okay, we're going to learn somatic stuff because like if
Yeah.
I can't shut that researcher off because she's going to find the thing.
Yeah.
And like the
Work
trauma
is so
is
good.
purified of being found. So for me, like somatic work and presence with myself is like so much better for me. I'm not traumatized
Yeah.
by my body again.
Totally, totally. And I love somatic work. I don't do it myself. It's like the one modality I really never learned.
Mm,
But I send everyone I know to cranial sacral work or myofascial
yeah,
release or somatic experiencing or, like so many great somatic practices. And I think especially when we're dealing with those younger parts of ourself,
yeah.
that, if you're dealing with any part of you before you were 6 years old, it's all in your body. It's all in your nervous system. It's all in your tissue and your fascia and like getting it out. Like we can't access it actually, I think, with our mind. So
It's
we
unconscious.
just can't, like, it's not available to that part of us. So I really think we have to handle it, on all the levels, like the physical level, the emotional level, the mental level, to understand our patterns, the spiritual level. But to me, the somatic level is so good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I do this, belong to this dance group and it's kind of like authentic movement. It's like an expressive dance kind of movement thing.
Mhm.
And before that I was a martial artist. I like to hit things. So then I was into boxing, I'm like and get in the ring. And I'm like, wow, I can do like 2 hours of therapy or 10 minutes in the boxing ring or 10 minutes on the dance floor.
Mhm.
Like you just move it out through my system,
Yeah.
that through movement, like on, purposeful movement.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's what works for me right now.
That's beautiful. Like, yeah, moving our bodies because our bodies have so much in us, and to
Mm,
allow it the space to release something is just so. Like I know I did this was about a year and a half ago. I was in California and there was going to be a power outage, and I had this existential fear of, oh my gosh, I will not have food if I don't get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and boil eggs. It's completely irrational. Like I don't even know where it came from. So I get up and I, turn the water on to boil eggs before we lose power because it was like one of those scheduled outages. And then I hear, why don't you like tune into some Stevie Wonder because Stevie Wonder always makes me happy. And so then I tune into one of his tunes and then I'm like, how about I dance while because I'm still feeling the anxiety, stress, irrational fear. So I'm dancing and singing to Stevie Wonder. And then the eggs are done, and I'm like, why was I concerned? But I couldn't catch it in the moment because it was like such, one of
yeah,
the existential random fears that come up for no reason. You can't talk your way out of it.
right.
And the only way that I found is to move it out. So
Yeah. I mean, if it was Earth, Wind, and Fire, I'd be right there with you. Yeah, totally showing my age there, but it still
okay.
sounds good.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't matter. It's like
Oh,
got a
it's fun.
wide spectrum of songs. Yeah, it's just so cool when we find that space that like lets us get out of our heads.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Those problematic thinking mind.
It's an amazing tool. The horrible master.
Yep.
Yeah. So what are like, I mean, you've been psychic your whole life and you've had opportunities to be in your right brain most of your life. Do you ever have conflict with your left brain?
I think I'm relatively brain balanced.
Cool.
And I talk a lot about in my book. I wrote a book called Awakening Your Psychic Ability. And it came out in 2023. And that I talk a lot about brainwave states
Mhm.
and left brain, right brain, and how it works because it's important to know that. And there are a lot of people who are really, really heavily in their left brain, their analytical brain, that feel frustrated because they can't access their psychic information right off the bat. But honestly, I feel like we need both. So for me, and for most people, I think the downloads come into the right brain, the intuitive side, the emotional intuitive side, symbolic side of the brain, where we receive the download. But unless we learn how to shunt it over to the other side, the analytical side, it's very hard to make meaning out of it, you know? So we're like, well, I saw a bowl full of spaghetti. What does that mean? Like, we need both. We need very balanced access to both sides of this to be functioning. And also because I'm not psychic in a vacuum. I've got a client, I've got modalities, I've got, you know, methodology that I'm doing that's really caretaking my client. I'm not a trance channel. So I have to be, there's a part of me that's really present with my client in the moment. And the other part of me, that's the more of the left brain, and the right brain is sort of catching on to the psychic, the downloads, and pulling the information. And so for me, it's like it's really, I really need both to operate in this world,
Love that.
um yeah.
I've actually started taking more classes because my left brain wants to have a better comprehension of what my right brain does.
Yeah.
And to like really understand what quantum entanglement is and the multiple potentialities that exist and how to access healing in the quantum field. Like my left brain just loves learning that.
Yeah.
My right brain's already aware of it.
Yeah, me too. And I'm like very methodical for a psychic. I like a structure, a process, a system. And I, for me, like, knowledge was the antidote to fear. So I really wanted to learn and study, and I created a map of the psychic worlds, because I really wanted a system, and there is a system, when you know. So I find that I'm not like a super woo-woo psychic teacher who's like, well, you just have to feel it. I mean, yes, you have to feel it, but there's all the system that goes with it that to me is, it's like super comforting. Like, I
Mm.
want a method, a process, a structure, and I need that to kind of balance out the intensity of like the vastness of the ineffable, the unknowable parts of the universe that we're also dealing with.
I get that so well. Because it's like, okay, I notice when I'm doing a session, my handwriting goes to shit.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm just like really tuning in and just writing the best I can because I repeat the formula when I'm done. And as we tap it in, and I'm just like, for the longest, no, not the longest time, but like I asked for confirmation from my clients, like, did something happen? Because like I felt it, but my left brain needed the quantification of it.
Yeah.
And so and especially since I'm working with animals, like I don't get the feedback from the animals. I mean, I have a couple times. I worked on a sheep in England last year, and she was going to be put down. And we found out that the reason that she was lame was because she had heartbreak in her right elbow because her brother died. And so I got a video of her walking again, and I was like, okay, that's confirmation. That feels really good. Um, and we don't really need the confirmation. That's the ego part of us because we already feel it happening.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. And I also think like our logical brain, our skeptical brain, there's also like discernment in there,
Mhm.
and we need, like, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need discernment.
Yeah.
And I see like a lot of newbie psychics fall into, trouble because they've let go of their discernment, and they're just believing, like, don't believe everything, just because somebody said they channeled it doesn't necessarily mean you should believe it. Or if you're channeling and getting messages from your spirit guides and your higher self, we still need to fact check with our logical mind. Like, does that make sense? Is that going to put me in harm's way? Is that logical? Like, I've seen people really get into trouble by kind of abandoning their logical, practical side. And, I call it the angels made me do it. um, you know, Life mess up. Well, the angels made me quit everything and move to Timbuktu, and now I hate it. And I'm like, well, really? Like, why
Right.
did that make sense? Like, why did you do that? Like, I think that, you know, our soul has both sides, our higher self has both sides, our beingness has both sides. And so we really, need to, if you're too analytical, you might have to loosen that up and like learn how to connect with the more intuitive, emotive side of you. But we don't want to go so far into that we give up our practical, common sense.
Right. And I'll give an example of like that experience because I've been guided house sit for the past 5 months. I've been traveling around Oregon and Washington house sitting for people and pet sitting, and it's been so many lessons. Logically, made no sense. Intuitively, it made a lot of sense. And all of the lessons I've learned, and it was all discernment. Like I had the option not to, but something in me was like, no, I need to do this to spread light around these different places in Oregon and Washington. I
Mhm.
don't need to understand that. I just knew it. And
Well,
so
if you can get out of winter New England, God bless you. Like that's really, I mean,
I do not miss winter on the East Coast. So like, it's just this really interesting space of like knowing, like my usual agreement with my source self is like, okay, I'll do this. It's got to be easy.
mm,
'Cause if I'm going to jump off a cliff of not abandoning my left brain, but like doing something that my heart is telling me to do, that my left brain is going, really? You want to do this? Like if
yeah,
that is being like a deep resonance in my heart, I'll do it with the caveat that whatever is calling me to do this needs to make that situation easy because it's out of my comfort zone.
that's really smart. And I think when it's easy, we have like that's the green lights, we go towards it. And if it was hard, the heart like that's red lights, yellow lights, red lights, that's kind of like nope, that's the signs and omens are not favorable that, when it gets hard. But if you take the risk and take sort of that quantum leap and then all the lights turn green and it flows, I think that's a really great confirmation that we're headed in the right direction.
Right. And to be able to like trust that we're being held. I mean, this whole 5 month experiment of me doing this, I am so held and so protected. I can't deny it. And we all are. But I wouldn't have known that had I not taken this journey. And so it's
A
just,
leap of faith.
yeah. And that I think that's like building the spiritual muscles. The more we do those leaps of faith, the stronger we understand, like, oh, we are actually the creators of our reality, and we're source incarnate, um, that we've forgot, haven't been taught.
Yeah, I think it's going back to what we were talking about the mind is kind of it's usually the mind that our minds are coming up with all the reasons why we can't do that or why that's a bad idea or why like don't leave the comfort zone. The belief systems that we get really bought into. Um, it's not okay to have that much fun. That's what we get when we grew up in New England. Puritans, man. They really set the tone here in New England. They're such buzzkills. Um,
I know. I know. It was like, okay, now you have to be an adult. It's like, well, what does that mean? Like, you can't have fun anymore? I mean, I will say, like, moving out west in 2009, it was a culture shock in the best possible way.
mhm.
Like, you will understand this. You know how when you go swimming on the East Coast and you're at a gym and like somehow women like get dressed with a towel on?
Yeah.
Don't do that out here. You just take the towel off and get dressed. I'm like, oh, like that was shocking.
It's that Puritan thing. I escaped that because my mother was French
That's
and my grandmother was French. And, so I grew up with much more of a like your continental sort
that
of
is
attitude about,
awesome.
and they were hippie, my parents. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I missed that.
where in Massachusetts did you grow up?
I grew up in Newton, just outside
Okay,
Boston, but now I live in Rhode Island.
nice, nice. Little
It's a
less
little less uptight here, and it's really kind of laid back for a New England state. And 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 the weather's a little better. It's beautiful. Rhode Island's a beautiful state.
That's true. I've only been in a couple times, but yeah, no, it's really interesting because like I love New England. I haven't I when was the last time I was back? 2019, right before COVID. And it was beautiful. It was fall, and then I came back west, and I was like, because there's a little more latitude to being. Um, for me, I had trouble just being on the East Coast.
Yeah. Yeah, I love New England too, and I'm not sure I'll ever leave, but I feel it. I feel what you're talking about. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's just this very curious state of awareness because I think there's so many programs and beliefs on the East Coast that are generational, epigenetic, like structurally in the culture that it's hard to, oh, I won't say hard, it just takes a lot. No, I'm not going to say that either. I'm going to cancel clear all of that. Um, there's an opportunity for some deep healing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean it's so much more crowded, and there's been a lot of history here and a lot of violence and conflict, and there's sort of a density to the energy here that
Mhm.
I don't find in other areas of the country.
Yeah.
Um and I don't know. I mean, I used to live in France, and I was like, why can't I live in France? And why in southern France too, And my
Ooh,
guides told me it's like, well, you need to be a candle in a darker place, a
yeah.
light in a darker place. And so I feel like I'm on assignment here. But I've found some really
Like
beautiful
that.
spots, and I've found what I love about it, and I'm just enjoying that sweetness.
Are you able to help other, like, I know you're online, but like, do you find more people in New England like getting interested in this?
New England's always been a hot spot. So it's just, there's always been like a lot of openness here. That I think it's one of the more open parts of the country to be doing spiritual exploration. Yeah. So I think like I work with students from all over the world, and I hear people a lot that say, well, I can't talk about it. You know, they'll throw rocks at me in the town if I tell people what I'm doing, that, and that's not like, it's not like that here. There's really, you know, a lot of tolerance and openness to deeper, spiritual studies.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fairfield County, not so much in the 70s. But it's okay.
Right. Now it's probably way different. It's
Yeah,
probably pretty loosened up there.
which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm. I am feeling that I am ready to ask you the last question. And that is, how do people find you?
Well, you can go to my website, lisacampion.com, and I have a lot of online courses there. I teach Reiki online. I teach all levels of psychic development from beginner, intermediate, pro to pro level. I have a mentorship program for people that want to become professional psychic healers. And then you can find my books anywhere people sell books.
Awesome.
And I have all the regular socials. I have a YouTube channel that has a lot of free content and all the regular social media stuff too. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your light, for the work you do in the world, and your beingness.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for all of that too, and for hosting this beautiful podcast so that you can spread the light.
You're welcome. Thank you.